What you see here are a variety of different shaped pottery molds made of plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris is a white material that, when it has dried and hardened, is quite fragile and soft, and also is very absorbent. It will wick the moisture out of your clay to stiffen the clay. These ones that have sort of a domed shape are a hump mold, where you drape a slab over the curvature of the mold. This is a slump mold that you drape the clay into, and a press mold has both sides, a slump and a hump mold, that you place the slab between them and compress the shape. All of these molds rely on the use of a slab of clay draped into the mold. You can also use paper plates as a cheap alternative to plaster of Paris mold. Start with a thick chunk of clay, a paper plate, some water, a sponge, a potter's needle to cut the clay with, and a rubber rib. Use a rolling pin to roll the clay out into a slab, being careful to apply even pressure consistently across the slab. Periodically flip the slab of clay so that both sides are smoothed and stretched evenly. When you've stretched your clay out large enough to match the size of your paper plate, check that the thickness is consistent all the way through and that it is about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch in thickness. Take a rubber rib with the flat side and smooth and compress the surface of the slab. Be sure to flip your slab over and smooth the opposite side as well, in case there are any wrinkles from your fabric. Take your paper plate and invert it, placing it face down on your slab of clay in the center so as to avoid the outer thin edges. Take your potter's needle in a straight up and down fashion so as not to undercut the paper plate, and carefully trace around the outer edge of your paper plate. Cut through your scrap clay and take away the excess clay from around the paper plate. After you've trimmed away the shape of the paper plate, take a wet sponge and smooth all the jagged, sharp edges around the outer edge. Smooth, blend, and round the edge of your circle of clay. Flip your circular piece of clay, smoothing it if needed, and repeat with the damp sponge to smooth the outer rim. When the outer edges of your clay are smoothed and rounded, carefully lift it up with one hand and drape the circle of clay into the shape of your paper plate. Adjust it if you need to move the slab of clay slightly to one side or another. With a gentle tap, lift up your paper plate and drop it on the table, allowing gravity to help pull the shape of the clay to match that of your paper plate. Taking a damp sponge, very gently begin to press the clay into the paper plate. Do not press hard. Very gentle pressure at this point is important so that we are persuading the clay into the shape of the mold but not leaving dents, fingerprints, or large uneven patches. After your clay has reached leather hard, you should be able to peel it out of the paper plate. The clay should hold its shape, and now is the best time to write your name or initials on the bottom of the plate. Work gently with the clay. Although it holds its shape, you don't want to bend or flex it. If the paper plate left any paper residue on the back of your clay, don't worry. We can wipe this away with a sponge, or it will fire away and burn off in the kiln. Take a damp sponge and blend any of the grooves and creases on the underside of the plate that were left over from the paper plate mold. This is your opportunity to smooth and even out the clay, and also to round out the under edge of the rim of your plate. When using a paper bowl as a mold, start again with a slab of clay rolled out to an even, consistent thickness between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch thick. Again, use a rubber rib to compress and smooth the surface of the slab of clay. Taking your paper bowl, carefully lift up the slab of clay and drape it over the surface of the paper bowl. Lifting up the edges to encourage the center of the slab to drape down into the bowl, take a damp sponge and gently press and stretch the clay into the curve of the bowl. Work carefully and gently so that you slowly stretch the clay into the shape. Don't leave big indents. Using the sponge, tap and smooth the clay until it matches the curve of the bowl. Then take a potter's needle and cut through the slab of clay until you hit the bowl. Trim around the outer edge of the bowl, setting aside scraps of clay. Continuing to hold the potter's needle straight up and down, finish cutting the bowl out of the slab of clay. Continue to adjust the clay's fit into the paper bowl. Smooth and blend the clay, focusing on the outer edge of the rim of the bowl with a damp sponge. Continue to blend and smooth the clay until you're happy with it, then set it aside to air dry until it's leather hard. When the clay is leather hard, you should be able to peel it out of the paper bowl. The clay should hold its shape, but work with it gently so you don't distort the still soft clay. The edges may be very jagged and full of impressions from the paper bowl. Taking a cleanup tool and a damp sponge, clean up these edges to round them out and scrape away jagged, rough, sharp edges. Take the edge of the cleanup tool blade and drag it along the sharp edge to trim away the excess clay. Work around the entire rim of your bowl, cleaning up the edge, using a cleanup tool and a damp sponge to blend away indentations and rough edges. Work at the under edge of the bowl with a damp sponge, using gentle pressure to blend and wipe away indentations left from creases in the paper bowl.